All right, it seems like we are now live on YouTube as well. Okay. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hey, we're gonna start in 2 minutes, and yeah. I just noticed, David, you have an interactive background.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so I think we can start. I'm going to, at the very beginning, just share the agenda on the screen, and then Vershawn can take over with some of the housekeeping notes and a very brief introduction into AI Crowd. So let me start this here. Okay. Just checking that this is done correctly. That one. Share. Okay. Does everybody see the agenda at the moment?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So Vershawn, all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the town hall, and we're very excited to do this for the very first time. This challenge has been amazingly engaging for everybody who ended up participating, and this town hall will probably serve as one of the main punctuators to take the whole idea of this challenge forward. So I'll keep my thing brief. It would be good to see uh, where are all of us joining from. So, for example, I'm based out of Hyderabad in India right now, and as we know, we had about 50 different countries from which we saw participants. So if all of you can just go to the chat thing, and you can just type in what's your name, and where you're from. That would give us some great idea of what is the diversity of our whole participant pool. What does it look like? So for example, I see Charles is from France. We have someone from Canada. I'll type for myself. Awesome. We have someone from Kenya, Japan. So it's actually very late in Japan. I think it's somewhere close to 2 a.m. So thank you for joining, and we apologize that we were not able to accommodate as many time zones. Argentina, Ireland, US. Fantastic. Okay, so it's great to see that we have a great amount of diversity here. Uh, there will be only very few house rules that we'll want to follow. Of course, the first thing is that we'll keep ourselves muted, including the panelists, as when somebody is speaking, so that we don't end up interacting the flow. And on Zoom, it can become weird very soon. The other thing is we'll have dedicated Q&A sessions at the end of the talks and at the end of the panels, and of course, the attendees, they can use the raise hand feature to ask their question live, or they can use the Q&A feature as well as the Q&A feature to post their questions, which the speakers can take up as they are talking, and everyone can vote, upvote, and also comment on what they think the question should look like. And as the questions get answered, we can move them to answered, or we can move them to rejected, or anything of that sort. Along with that, of course, feel free to use the chat feature to post your reactions and comments as they come. That's about it. Ali, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rishank. Yeah, so let's get into it. You can see the rough agenda in front of you. Before I address that, I'm quite amazed at the number of countries that people are joining it from. So that's quite exciting to have people from Miami and Kenya, and at the same time Japan joining. I'm jealous of all of you collectively. But okay, so let's get into it. I'm gonna dive straight into the presentation by myself and Florent, which will be quite brief so that we can make time for Michael's presentation right after. So motor insurance market simulation, that was the name of the challenge. And over this presentation, I'm going to try and give you a very brief overview of what we were thinking when we wanted to design the challenge. I know some of you will be keen to see what we come up with from a research perspective, but we haven't had enough time to dig into that yet. And keep an eye out for publications on that. We will be informing you about that soon. But let's dive into it. So in this presentation, I'm going to be very briefly discussing data and the future of insurance, going over the goal of the design of these markets and how our thinking was informed by some of our intuition. And finally, we're going to end with some very early analysis as a taster of what may come in the future. Now, when we're talking about insurance and data, this industry is one of those industries which has been data rich for a very long time. This dates back to 2000 BC almost, where people were trying to figure out how to hedge their own risk against natural disasters, villages coming together, putting a pool of money aside in case somebody's house burns down, all the way, you can fast forward to the Lloyds of London doing underwriting for risks, for bespoke risks, which they still do today. And then as time went on and we managed to make mathematics and data more accessible, we started to formalize our idea of how these risks are measured. And in the 70s, when generalized linear models started to become more accessible, suddenly everybody started to shift towards that. And dare I say that I think we're still feeling the GLM dominance in the world of insurance. Recently, we've had a little bit of evidence of nonlinearity, and that's where our thinking with Florent was informed when we wanted to design this. Now, when let's go back to this last piece. We're talking about GLMs to evidence of nonlinearity. So we were thinking together that maybe there's a new type of market that might emerge soon because of this. So why are we thinking this? Well, there's new modeling techniques. So there's a wider adoption of ML and AI tools. There's new data coming in, telematics, IoT, smartwatches, new players that are in, and of course, many other new things like regulations, business lines, customers, etc. But if anybody has any experience with trying to research something, you have to focus on one of these things. And to us, the most interesting piece is the modeling piece. So the adoption of machine learning, over the more traditional methods such as GLMs. So we identified roughly 3 components to what makes a realistic market when we're concerned with this particular question on ML AI adoption. The first one is expert participation. So in any market, for it to have a chance to be considered realistic, um, it needs to have the right experts in it. And if you've been on the discourse forum for this challenge, you know that we managed to get the experts. From the surveys we've been conducting, 80% of the people who played in the game have experience in the insurance industry. I think 60% are qualified actuaries. Now, how did we do this? We reached out to partners in industry. So these were 21 national actuarial associations and a few industry partners. You can see some of their logos here. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit everyone there, but everybody has our gratitude. Now, beyond expert participation, the next piece was to design the base market well. And the issue there is that, okay, so inside insurance, there is the aspect of pricing and claim estimation, and we need to capture both of these. And we wanted to somehow be able to create an environment where realistic dynamics starts to emerge. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Lastly, there is feedback. When you're in a market engaging with other competitors, you get some feedback about your performance. In the real world, you go in and then you give a offering for a particular policy or a set of portfolio, and then you might go bankrupt, for example, or you might do poorly. You need to know how you're doing. And we, as you know, we kind of ran with the feedback that we were getting from other competitors with designing the kind of feedback we would give you. But I'm not going to discuss the market feedback aspect here because we've been through that numerous times on Discourse, and we can go on those posts and discuss it. But the key takeaway here that I want to kind of impart is the key objective for us was to have a realistic market filled with experts such as yourselves playing inside a toy environment, which can kind of create these market dynamics. Okay, so let's talk about the market design piece. Now, I've put a little asterisk on market design because what I'm going to be discussing is kind of the tip of the iceberg of the things that we were discussing within the research team. But let's go over it. The first thing that happens in the real world is you estimate risk based on historical data. Okay, what do we have here inside of the pricing game as a parallel? Well, it was the RMSE leaderboard, which was inconsistent data. So that was our very first thinking. The second one is you want to compete with others for profit in a live market. So as you know, we had these repeated profit leaderboards on disjoint data. Now, one of the reasons that we didn't have something like a daily profit leaderboard was limitation of data. We didn't want to allow you to price the same policies in a repeated setting with other competitors multiple times, because that never happens in the real world. So we had to limit that. So we had to make sure that every time we give you a data set, you've never seen it before and you're pricing it as you go along. So therefore, the balance that we struck between how often you have a leaderboard and how much the leaderboard size can be was weekly. Now, other than these two pieces, the last thing is that there are consequences for bad market performance in the real world. Sometimes that's bankruptcy, sometimes that's just a bad performance on a quarter. And the way that and what this ends up translating to is that those bad performing models in a real market end up slowly being weeded out. They don't participate in the market as much. So what we came up with was this 2-round profit metric, where in the first round, we were getting all the good models in the top 10%. And in the second round, we were kind of weighting all the rest of the markets towards the competition with these guys. So the good guys play more often. And that's how we managed to create consequences without having a situation where we kick people out of the game, because you don't want to be kicked out of a game like this. We want everybody to play. Now, this is a very rough overview of the thinking that we had when we went into this game. There is some very early analysis that my colleague Florent will run you through, but I'll just caveat it to say that this is super early stuff, and all the cool stuff will be coming in the next couple of months, hopefully. Florent?
Yep. Thanks, Eddie, for the presentation. I think we can move on to the next slides. Yeah, and so, I mean, essentially, we're going to show 2 plots here that are kind of preliminary results from the analysis we already run. We're not going to show the leaderboard yet. Like, you have to wait some more for this. But so the first question that we kind of looked at was like, we have 2 leaderboards. We have the RMSE and the profit one, and like, is there a link between the two? And that's a question that's like popped up quite a lot on the forum as well. And it's quite an interesting question because it's basically, how can you actually improve in the market? Is it enough that should you like, aim for a better pricing, or is it just that you're going to get like better prices and more accurate predictions, and that is going to lead you to have a better profit? And the answer, as you can see, is kind of mixed. Like, it does seem that there is some relation between the two, but as you can see, like the R square is still quite large, but there is some correlation. Like, if your model is significantly worse, then you are less likely to make some profits in the market. Also note that here I'm saying significantly worse, but we're not talking about many percentage points here. Like, if you look at the RMSE axis, we've voluntarily trimmed between 2 kind of very similar numbers, because most models actually have very similar performances, which is pretty interesting for us. And there's a second point here on this plot that I invite you to look at, is like in the top left corner. You can see like these 3 models that seem to have the best profit, but also these models have very low RMSE, or at least are among those models that have low RMSE. So there's something quite interesting there that, well, in general, maybe it does help to have a more accurate model, but it appears that at least for the winners of this competition, well, this very accurate model is something that we're able to capitalize on, because they do better than most other models. And the that we looked at is, what is the link between market share and profits? And that's also something that we've been talking quite a lot. Like, we've given you also like in the feedback, you have these plots where you can see like market share over many repetition of the market. So this plot is a bit different here, is that you have the expected market share and the expected profit. So this is like the average over all repetition of the market. And here you can see that there's a pretty strong effect, actually. R square is much better in that it tends to appear that those models that have a higher market share tend to also be much worse in terms of profit. And I mean, the way we explain this, at least at this stage, is like, well, this is pretty clearly some curse, right? So if you tend to get many more contracts, you also tend to get them because you price them too low. And so that, I mean, I don't need to explain this to you, but like, and so that's why you have these lower profits. And similarly, if you look, there seems to be like 3 points. They're particularly remarkable because they don't necessarily follow this trend in the top corner, that these are people who've at the same time managed to have high profit, but also a market share that is larger than the default market with like 10 firms, which is 0.1. And yeah, these were like the preliminary results. It's exciting, but we can't say much at this stage. So we wait a few more months, hopefully not too many months, and then we have a scientific publication soonish where we publish this in greater detail and hopefully with some interesting insights. So that was kind of the organizer side of the competition. I'm just going to give back to Ali. It's going to like explain what's coming next in this town hall.
Yeah, awesome. I can see some questions are already starting to pour in. We'll keep track of that and we'll address it at the end. But I imagine this one is going to be addressed once we reveal the leaderboard. Okay, so just to give a bit of structure of what's going to happen now is that next we're going to start with the presentations. First, we're going to hear from Michael, then there's going to be Edwin, World Experts by David, Grape Sentry, Sarah, and then Guillaume at the very end. Something to keep in mind, of course, is if you can use the Q&A feature, do use the Q&A feature. There's also the Slido link for asking questions that has been shared on the chat by Guillaume. We'll be collecting all those questions at the very end. If you can be specific about the slide numbers, it's helpful, but if not, then that's okay. And if there's an issue, there's me, Rashank, and Guillaume that you can reach out to, and we'll try and address it. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, and Michael, you can take over when you're comfortable. Right.
So hi, you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes, good. All right, perfect. So I'll be presenting what I've been doing on this competition. Just to know me better, I'm 34 years old from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I'd say I'm a typical actuary in home and auto. I've been working with GLMs, with traditional actuarial software. I'm also within R&D team full of young data scientists, all skillful in Python and R. I've been maybe a little bit jealous about their work, so I thought this competition would be my motivation at learning R and start a journey into machine learning. I'd say to win those type of competition, feature engineering is the key. Go crazy, do as much as you can, don't stop. Baby steps, starts with baby steps. You have population and surface area. Perhaps you can calculate the population density. That's a start. And then you improve your game, and you can actually like guess an actual vehicle value. Define an exponential depreciation curve. And personally, I added a reversal for very old vehicles such as collectibles that would improve in value over time. So we were given variables from 4 broad spheres, which are shown here. And really, you have to have a thorough thinking about the variables and how they interact with each other and how it could influence the insurance risk. I would go through assumptions. So I would think, okay, maybe a young, inexperienced driver with a faster vehicle will be more risky. Heavier vehicle can be more risky, create more damage, more expensive vehicle. So you do, basically you can multiply the variable together, or whenever you think of something, or do a brute force way and create all the ratios possible with all the variables you have. I've added other features, such as comparing you, a specific client, with the average of your same age. So here, are you driving a vehicle that is much more expensive than your friend of the same age? So here you have the average per drive age, the vehicle value. I've made some selection to have a smoothed line, and I would calculate the distance between you and the average. I guess it would reflect some client behavior, perhaps frugality, something that to capture something different about you more specifically. I did that for plenty of other variables, such as like the vehicle age. Are you driving a vehicle much newer or older than your friend? And so on. So I did that with plenty of other variables. I've also created features based on your own history with insurer. Have you switched vehicle, moved to a new city, change your coverage, change your payment frequency, and much more importantly, did you claim, and how much money have I been giving you in the past? Those were pretty significant features. For categorical variables, I did some target encoding. The key is to transform text into numbers. You can look into the actual response variable to get some insight on how you can input a numerical value. The goal here is to be correlated with the risk, but not too much, because beware, if you do too much target encoding, it will lead you to leakage. Personally, I did have leakage. As I progressed in the competition, my score would deteriorate. And I'm telling you, if you do too much target encoding, you will experience leakage. Your model will be useless on new data. As an example, for vehicle make model, I did some mean target encoding. Even though I used heavy smoothing, I still ended up having leakage. Ultimately, for that feature, I only created a vehicle popularity index. Rationale behind it, I guess, if a vehicle is popular, it would be cheaper to repair broader parts of availability and vice versa. Once I had all my features, about 300 and so variables, I started to go crazy on models. So I did tried every model that I could try. So here are the list, and I also did frequency and severity and loss cost. So in total, about 18 different models to tune. In the end, to improve the claims prediction, I would do stacking. So on top of the 18 models, I would train 4 meta-learning models. Again, now I did some neural network too. My final prediction would be a final average of the 4. So overall, I tune about 22 models. And then I did some market simulation. With having so many models on hand, I tried to replicate what was done by the staff. So I used all my 11 models as insurers, trained them 8 different times. So to have a better understanding how they perform against each other. I did notice that no model was winning systematically. However, I did see that the frequency times the severity would perform better than the loss cost models directly. I also tried to understand, just a note, those graphs were shared on the forum too. So there's plenty of discussion about those charts. I also tried to understand the correlation between a profit rank and the typical loss function that would use to estimate how a model is performing. I did see that the correlation was not that strong with profit. You can have the best profitable model would not score the best in terms of RMSE or Gini. This simulation also made me understand that models had a natural tendency to win different segments without me ever doing specific things to direct them into specific type of policies. So I was quite surprised to see this difference here. Profit loading. So perhaps this is my biggest mistake. I spent 10 weeks working on features. Everything that I've described so far, probably spent 2 minutes on loading. So I was always doing a 10% loading. And so I had, at the end, I woke up on week 10, no idea how to load my prices. Didn't find much value in the weekly feedback besides perhaps market share. I had to improvise. So I thought, let's recycle my simulation and build a market of 10 insurers and try ask the question. So what loading should I put to have all the insurers end up profitable? Results were highly volatile, between 25 and 40%. And in the end, I thought, I should aim lower than that to account that some insurers will end up losing money. So my final approach in loading was to have first a variable loading of about 15% and a variable loading that it was proportional to the odds of having a claim. So the expected frequency here, partially because it was only 60 to 50% of this. Those were selected overall to have a loading of approximately 23%. That was varying case by case here, as you can see, depending on the frequency risk. And my end game was for the final leaderboard. I noticed that we had only 43% were new clients, 57 were part of the training data. So I submitted a file that had 2 models in it. So one that would generalize to all business and one that would fit to known clients using some past claim counts and amounts from the training data. So I was hoping that would be cherry picking policies here and others would suffer from adverse selection. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I'm just going to share a tweet by AI Crowd where this was also one of Michael's greatest contributions that's shared in a tweet. while you check that out, Edwin, please feel free to take over from Michael by sharing your screen. This was super fascinating for me and Guillaume. I know we've been chatting on it offline.
Hi, can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Cool. Yeah, so that was really, really interesting. I think there's going to be some repetition through some of these presentations. So got 10 minutes, so let's go. First of all, let me introduce myself and tell you a little bit about why competition interested me. So I'm a data scientist and art programmer. I work for RSA Insurance Group in the data science team within the underwriting and pricing department. I've been there for just over 10 years, so I've got just over a decade of experience working in insurance pricing across several different products, but the most relevant product for this competition being the UK personal lines motor market. And for the last 5 years or so, the majority of the work I've been doing has been working to research and develop machine learning models, particularly gradient boosting machines, for use in insurance pricing. All really relevant for the competition. I also have some experience of similar competitions. So between 2015 and 2018, I was quite active on Kaggle, and with varying success, but overall well enough to have earned the competition master on my profile. And the competition came at a good time. We're in lockdown in the UK. When the competition started, I was living with my parents, and the first couple of weeks I spent a lot of time getting going, and that really kick-started my work on the competition. I probably spent about 6 to 12 hours a week on the competition for most of the 10 weeks it ran. I tailed off a little bit in the last couple of weeks until deadline pressure near the end forced me to start working really furiously on all the things I thought about but not got around to doing. And I, like most people, I probably ran out of time. I didn't do all the things I wanted to do. The strategy that I set forth at the start was that I wanted to have a really sharp claims model to minimize the anti-selection effect, winner's curse in the market, and win business that's at profit that other people couldn't, was the plan. I know everyone's going to have really good sharp models at the top as well. I have a lot of experience using GBM, so I wanted to make extensive use of gradient boosting machines. In the end, I only end up using XGBoost. I wanted to have a very robust validation approach so that any changes I made to my model, I could have a very good idea that they did improve the model, and I tested a whole lot of things that I ended up having to throw away because they deteriorated the model. But it's good having a robust validation approach. Possibly the main thing that might set me apart from other competitors was the fact that I was thinking very much about the end, the year 5 final leaderboard data from the start, where for 60% of the policies that we're pricing, we have information about their past claims and the evolution of their no claims discount. In the training data, about 30% of policies had at least one claim. So in the final year 5 data, we should see about 20% of those policies having at least one claim in the last 4 years that we know of. About 40% we know that they didn't have a claim in the last 4 years, and the other 40% we don't know anything about. My goal was to have a model that was able to generalize well to all 3 of those buckets. And I wanted to compete for every policy. I didn't want to be a niche insurer that was focusing on one specific segment. I wanted to have prices that were competitive across the board. We all have the same training data after all, so no reason why I shouldn't be able to do that. This is my validation approach. I'm going to leave it up on screen. I'm not going to talk too much about it just due to time. This inner loop here was the majority of my time was spent making changes to the algorithm to build my model, and validating that against using cross-fold validation, where the folds were split by policy ID, so the same policy couldn't occur in multiple folds, which would potentially lead to overfitting. I did a lot of feature building, and I was strict on my feature selection. So for a feature to make it into my model, it wasn't enough to just slightly improve the cross-validation score. I was worried about sort of overfitting to my validation score. So I was biased towards not including features. So I ended up with a relatively modest feature set. I must have tested 5 times as many features. It's interesting, in the last presentation, there were features that I didn't think of. There were features that I did think of and are in there, and there were features that I tested and didn't find that they improved my model enough, and ended up being dropped. But there was an outside validation loop as well to make sure that I wasn't just overfitting my cross-fold validation, which I must have run hundreds, maybe thousands of times. So the features that I ended up using, I had features around youngest and oldest driver and age difference between the 2 drivers, which I found useful. I did do target value encoding, and again, it was quite heavily smoothed towards a global mean, and I was careful to apply my target value encoding on an outer fold basis, so as not to overfit. But obviously, leakage is a worry. But I did find that using some target value encoding by vehicle did improve my model, and target value encoding by location also did. And I considered a unique combination of population and town service area to be a unique location. I also used lots of features that captured claims history by policy. There's more slides on that I'm going to go into. And if there was a magic feature in this competition, it would be this one. And I've got another slide on it. I don't really understand why. When I first started, vehicle age was my most important feature. It doesn't really ring true. It's never. Driver age should, in my opinion, be this more strong feature. But when I looked at year minus vehicle age, as in the vehicle year of manufacture.
Sorry to interrupt, just a 2-minute warning. We're going.
2-minute warning, sure. This is what I saw, a very strong step function. Between year minus 12 and year minus 11, the claims frequency doubles for some reason. I have no idea why, but that was my strongest feature. I'm going to completely skip, because I'm running out of time, my pricing strategy, which was very simple and a similar story to Michael. I found feedback very difficult, and I'm basically shooting blind a little bit. But just to go through what I did on claims history, this is raw data for a specific policy. You can see that there are claims in years 1 and 3. What I did was I augmented the training data with multiple rows, or 2 rows per combination of ID policy in a year, weighted so that they sum to 1, with missing data for one of the rows, and with claims history data. So for example, this column is a count of years in the past 1 year that had a claim, and count of years in the past 2 years that had a claim, and 3 years. The blanks being missing data, which XGBoost can work with. Yeah, those features were very strong in my final model. So my final model was an ensemble of 3 submodels. I found splitting into frequency and severity very helpful. So 2 of them were, and there were 7 XGBoost models that formed part of the ensemble, and a GLM on top, a stack model, and then just a few adjustments for rare things that the XGBoost algorithm wasn't really picking up. So for example, I was over predicting for hybrid vehicles, which had quite a low average claim cost, but were rare. So I had a few adjustments at the end. I think I'm probably out of time. I have a little bit more, not very much interesting, but I'm happy to share slides and answer any questions. I'll hand back.
Thanks, Edwin. I mean, it's fascinating the amount of work that you put into it, and I will have to sit down and study that chart of yours a bit more in detail.
Sure.
But for now, there are some questions for you, but we'll leave that to the end.
Sure.
I wanted to prime David, who is our next presenter, to start sharing his screen. I'm sure we'd be very excited to see what you've been up to as well. Oh,
hi, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here to share our team's solution for this game. So I'm David, and my other teammates are also in this Zoom, William and Gloria. So my background is I have a bachelor degree in actuarial science at the University of Hong Kong, and I also completed a master degree in big data technology in Hong Kong University of Science and Technology last year. Now I'm a data analyst in GIC, the sub-4 fund in Singapore, basically doing some portfolio analytics and reporting for the equities. And insurance is not like a purely new thing for me, because I got some experience in life insurance through the internship in Prudential. But for general insurance, I really don't have much clue on it. So much business knowledge is really learned from this competition. And I got to know this game through the Singapore Actuary Society. I'll share my approach in 3 parts, and you may notice that I didn't include the feature engineering, because I think the other presenters actually share a lot, and I actually don't differentiate much from them. So it will be in 3 parts: the overall architecture, models, and the pricing. The overall architecture is quite simple. So for each policy, I will have 2 models. One just to detect whether a claim will be large. Another model is to predict the expected claim. For the claims that is predicted to be large, I will apply a heavier loading. And for it to be low loading, I will just apply a lower loading. And by combining the loading with the expected claim, I will generate the final price. The reason for me to pick this architecture is that I actually refer to the feedback, and I see the model having positive slope, which means it actually can generate more profit if I have higher market share. So the old general performance is fine. It's just that I'm always winning some large claims, which shift my profit towards the negative side. So since week 8, I noticed the key to secure a higher position would be to avoid the large claim. So after switching to this architecture, I managed to reduce the loss and to secure a more stable profit as well as a higher position in the leaderboard. You can see the slope is not like that positive like before, because I also changed some pricing strategies, and I also guess that other also changed the pricing strategy as well. So some fluctuation, but overall more stable profit. So for the large claim detection model, I picked 3,000 as the threshold. So it accounts to around 0.66% of the overall policies. It's still a very imbalanced classification, but 3,000 is just the number I picked to strike a balance between having enough sample or being unique enough. Imbalance learn is a very useful package, which helped me to do some backing and resampling for the XGBoost classifier. And for the logistic regression, I just simply adjust the class weight. So I call it a conservative approach because if any of these two classifiers predict it as large, any of them, I would just predict it as large. You can see that. So this is the confusion matrix of the model. You can see that out of 100%, 46% is labeled as large. And within the large and non-large group, you can see the large claim percentage actually differentiates, which means the model is able to pick up the large claims and mark it down from 0.66 to 0.2%. Of course, I also sacrifice half of the market share because I would just apply a heavy loading and avoid those large claims that I predicted. For the claims estimation model, I also use a stacking approach where I will have 7 base models and a vector model as a second layer and with the final prediction. I also include all the data. So I will not exclude the 0 claims, and I also kept the claim amount in 5,000 because I think if we train the model, you can see the model always got a bias towards the outliers. So no matter treaty loss or RMSE, it will be training towards the large claim will have too much importance. So I need to cap the claim amount. Yeah, so for a base model, generally it will be having good performance and independent to each other. But the meta model would be simple to avoid overfitting. Yeah, so for the base models, I will have a GOM, which is a 3D regression, and also to account for the fact that GOM cannot predict target on non-linear relationship. I make some handcrafted features, such as interactions or binarizations. For gradient boosting machines, I have 4 different models. And a key point I want to make for gradient boosting machine is to use the monotonicity constraint because it can avoid overfitting. And I think it's also useful for the practitioners because sometimes it's hard to explain why the model is learning some noise. So if you know that this variable is having a monotonic relationship, then it would be good to add that constraint. And I also have 2 neural networks, both very shallow and small, 2 to 3 layers, 64 neurons. These 2 networks differentiated by the objective functions, whereby the first one is having a classic treaty loss. I just predict the expected claim. The second one is a bit tricky. I predict the parameters of a distribution, the 0 inflated log normal distribution. So 3 parameters. P is the probability of having a claim, and then mu is the expected claim given that a claim is made, and the standard deviation. conditional. So meta model will predict the actual claim using the 7 base model predictions as features. It is just like Edwin. I have a generalized linear model as the meta model. I think it's robust enough, and yeah, I don't want to make it too complicated as the meta model. So finally, the pricing part is also quite simple. I didn't do my market simulation. It's just a formula. So we can see there is a minimal premium of 5 because I think, yeah, if the claim is too small, it's prone to underpriced. And for the profit loading, I have a fixed percentage of around 15%, and also a conditional loading on 2 conditions. If it is predicted as a large claim, then I'll apply 50%. If it is like within the top percentile of the expected claim, then I will also apply some penalty because, yeah, actually it's also to protect me from getting some large claims. I also got a fixed loading because I want the profit ratio to be higher for the small claim. From my analysis, when the model predict the claim to be like very extremely small, there's a high chance that I'm doing like underpriced. That's why I apply fixed loading. So you can see the profit ratio is skewed U-shaped. So from a very high percentage for small claims, and then gradually decrease, and then gradually increase when it reached the top percentile.
Just to interrupt, a 2-minute warning.
Yep.
Go on.
Yeah, actually it's at the end of my sharing. Yeah, so you can contact me by the above email or GitHub account. So I still got 1 minute, so I would like to share some of my thoughts on this competition. So I think the feedback is generally useful, especially for the market share and profit chart. But for the table below, it's actually quite hard for me to get some sense of what it means, because there are too many factors that I need to take account into. Unless I'm trying some strategies that I target some market segments. Otherwise, it will be quite hard to make use of the table. Yeah, and that's my feedback on the weekly feedback. Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David. I was I mentioned on the chat, but I was quite impressed with the confusion matrix and detecting large claims. Lots of people were struggling with that aspect throughout the competition. But and now I think we can move on to Team Grape Sentry. I don't know who's going to be presenting,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Please feel free to share your screen.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much for having us to the town hall. We are Team Guy Carpenter. Oops, no, Team Grape Sentry. I'm Guru, and the other members are Sarah and Kotaro. We are from Tokyo, Japan. So actually, it's almost 3 a.m. here, so we are supposed to be very sleepy. But we are not sleepy at all because this competition and this town hall are so much fun. So we are honored to be able to present today. The title is Stacking GLN. To begin with, I will give you a brief introduction. We are colleagues from Guy Carpenter, Japan, that operates reinsurance broking in the world. Sarah and myself are actuary and are in charge of reinsurance pricing, structure analysis, and so on. Kotaro is a catastrophe risk engineer and responsible for natural disaster risk analysis. We have a data science team internally. We love to try something new and learn machine learning techniques. This is why we participated in this competition. Before we dive into our detailed strategy, let me give you an overview of our model pipeline. After preprocessing the training data, with a certain threshold for the claim amount split into attritional loss and large loss model phases. Also, loss models were created by decomposing the element of probability of loss occurrence and that of loss severity. In both attritional and large models, we use stepwise GLM that performs feature selection as a base model. For large loss model, we thought that capturing large losses is very essential point. So we considered a stacking method in which random forest was used for training prior to GLM, and its predicted value was used for stepwise GLM's input. This is our stacking GLM idea. Finally, multiplying probability and severity results in pure premium. Regarding model selection and threshold judgment, we went through the validation process on the right-hand side. We decided to use two chronological patterns. One is to purely predict the future year using the data of its previous years. The other is a similar pattern as a leaderboard, which 50% of next year's data is allocated for training data and testing data. Next, here is our roadmap or thought process. We started in the week 6. By repeating trial and error, we simply thought that if we aimed for high prediction accuracy, namely low RMSE model, we would be able to obtain high profit model for the time being. However, we found the market game were very interesting and not easy to go. So we got used to the rules of the competition gradually, and by the week 7 or 8, we came up with that it was important to split the loss element into large loss and attritional loss, same as insurance pricing logic. At the end of the game, in the week 9 or 10, thankfully we got more and more feedback, such as heat map, like in the middle of the slide. Also, looking at the leaderboard, we saw that the market share of the top teams were very low, very interesting. So then we thought that everyone was avoiding large losses, so we made the same strategy. So I will pass to Sarah and ask her to explain our strategy, key strategy.
Thanks, Guru. So first strategy is ensemble approach, specifically stacking. So ensemble approach is an approach where we use multiple machine learning method in order to obtain a better prediction. And there are multiple approaches within ensemble approach, but here we decided to use stacking. And in stacking, we create a model using one machine learning method and then using that prediction as an additional information in the final model. In our case, we decided to create random forest model first and use that prediction as additional data in stepwise GLM. And since we created separate models for probability of claim occurrence and severity, we did the same here. And there are slight difference in how we use random forest prediction in the final GLM. So for probability, we use random forest predictions as a new feature because we hope that random forest can capture some interactions or characteristics that GLM alone cannot pick up and add that info into GLM. On the other hand, we use random forest prediction as an offset term for the severity modeling. When we have known values that we want to add in GLM, but want to use without unknown parameter beta, then we can use offset term. And we knew that one of the most common ways for us in insurance to use is using exposure value as offset term to predict claims. So we wanted to incorporate something similar in our model. So we decided to use random forest because it can capture large losses better than GLM, and hopefully it can also capture nonlinear relationship that GLM cannot capture on its own. And additionally, hyperparameter tuning was relatively easy because of the number of hyperparameters. And also we could get reasonable predictions with some default numbers. So next is loss element decomposition. We decided to create separate models for attritional losses and large losses. And this is a common practice in insurance, and we wanted to do this because they usually have different characteristics and distributions. And we set the threshold amount first, and we used anything below for attritional loss modeling and anything above for large loss modeling. And for attritional loss, in general, it has a light tail, so we use some simple stepwise GLM and use Gaussian distribution. For large losses, we use the stacking GLM method that I just introduced earlier, and instead of using Gaussian, we use gamma distribution, which can have heavier tail. And another difference is the measurement that we used when we did stepwise selection. So we used BIC for attritional and AIC for large loss because BIC penalizes heavier for having too many features, and we wanted some more simple and stable model for attritional, while we wanted the large loss model to be able to capture the low frequency and high severity claims. And lastly, let's introduce our pricing strategy. So as AI crowd team mentioned, and you probably have noticed throughout the competition, the accurate model does not always equal to having higher rank in the profit leaderboards. So what we decided to do is avoid selling any policies that could have any claims and then just sell the zero claim policies. So to do that, we used random forest classification model to flag which policy we want to sell and which we don't. And by having the probability of that policy having no claim, we set a very conservative threshold to decide which policies to sell. And from there, we sold all the policies we wanted to sell at pure premium that we got from our model without any margin. And for the ones that we don't want to sell, we just put pretty much infinity margin so that we don't accidentally be the cheapest price for any of the large losses. And we ended up with this strategy because as the weeks went by, we realized that the ones on the top of the profit leaderboard had very small market shares, which meant that they're not offsetting their large losses by selling as many no-claim policies as possible, but they're probably just avoiding risky policies to begin with. So these were our 3 key strategies in this competition. And I will pass this back to Sigur for the summary.
Thanks, Sarah. I will summarize our thoughts through this experience. Firstly, from an actuarial standpoint, such as regulation, accountability-wise, a simple and high interpretable model is required. In that sense, we chose GLM as a base with random forest, what we call stacking GLM, for our model. It was interesting and great that we could build a quite simple method in this game, and we could receive good evaluation as a result. Although our strategy was to win profit leaderboard by trying to sell only low policies in this competition, as a reinsurance broker, we are keen to apply machine learning methods to assess low frequency and high severity risks, such as natural catastrophe risks for realistic market. We are very interested in how to deal with those high risks by modeling. If we want to relate to the realistic market, looking forward to project or competition, focusing or considering a risk diversification scheme, we also realize the business doesn't always work as such the cheapest wins game situation. So we would like to bring the machine learning techniques to the more realistic business, which is facing to the inadequacy of the data, or high risks also should be included for the profit consideration. Anyway, though it was our first time to take part in data science competition, not only aiming the projection accuracy, but competing in market against other players was so much fun. All right, this is the very last slide. Here is our contact details. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments. We want to thank to the AI crowd, organizers, sponsors, other players, audiences, and all parties involved for giving us such wonderful opportunity. Looking forward to another happy pressing game in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Guru. It was really fascinating to see this. I didn't give you the 2-minute warning because I knew that you were going towards the end of it. So there have been some questions for you, I believe, but we're gonna answer those at the very end. Guillaume, please do share your screen and we can go from there. Can you share your screen? I don't see you here. Rashan, can you please promote Guillaume to a panelist, please?
He should be up. He should be here in about like 10 seconds.
Fantastic. Oh, there he is.
Okay, thank you for promoting me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I will present the approach I followed. Let me share my screen. Here I am. So my name is Guillaume. I work for Accurate, which is a insurance software provider, and I will present the way I approached the game, which was quite heavily relying on the platform we developed here. So really, overall in the pricing, I think you have 3 main components. The first one is the risk models you create. So they have to be precise. You want to avoid adverse selection and all these kind of features of the risk models. You have your margin strategy. So unfortunately here, we had very limited feedbacks. So we could not create great margin strategies. But still, there were some discussions on what's the best strategy, like not too much, not too high, not too low. And finally, the last component is clearly luck here. Well, like in real life, but here it was even stronger, I guess. So of course, if you get a bad claim or if the market shifts in an unexpected way, it's too bad for you. It's very important not to confuse luck with operational risk or like mistakes. I mean, you cannot escape luck, but you can provoke it. So bad luck, at least. So of course, it's extremely important during the whole process to avoid these kind of things. It's true here, I think, and it's even more true in real life. So the approach has to be as simple as possible and with as many feedback as possible during the model creation. So really, I took this one from the forum. So thank you, Simon. I just changed 2 things. The first thing is that actually the one here chasing away the neural net or the gradient boosting is not GLMs, it's GAMs. So it's generalized additive models, and you can do it with machine learning. Like building GAMs manually is very, very old-fashioned and very limited in what you can do. So the idea is that, well, you have a set of variables, you build your model, you want to predict something, and the generalized additive models, the GAM, will do it with a clear, like additive or multiplicative formula, meaning that you will pick a limited number of variables in your data set, mix them together with direct effects, multiply them, and get your predictions. So, and it's very important to stress that it's not GLM, it's GAM. So it's additive, it's nonlinear model. Ali, I heard you saying that you wanted to oppose them to nonlinear techniques. No, it's not true. GAMs are not nonlinear. By design, they capture nonlinear effects like this one. The difference with other machine learning like gradient boosting or these kind of things is that GAMs are parsimonious and they can be decomposed. So you can visualize the effect of each variable like in the model, not in analysis, and you can manage the number of variables in your model. It's very, very useful to have this capability. For instance, here, I guess we all had this example with this kind of vehicle usage, all trips, that was very, well, looks like it was very bad, but there was very limited data to really estimate it. And if you fit a gradient boosting, or if you fit with machine learning a GAM, well, whatever model you fit with machine learning, it will try to detect what's significant in your data, and it will, well, ignore these kind of profiles. Here, when you use a GAM, what you can do is say, okay, this is not significant, but still I want to increase it, which avoids adverse selection here. It works the other way around too, like with here, for instance, for I think the duration of the policy. Here, above a few years, there was nothing very significant, so they are grouped together by the machine learning algorithm. It will be true whatever machine learning algorithm you would use. Well, else if you capture this, you would capture noise on other variables. But here you miss an opportunity because your predictions in orange are over your observations in purple. And it means that you are missing opportunities to get low risk clients here. So you want to use, like to interact with the model to force like the effect to be lower here, despite having no proof that it's really lower, but you have the feeling that it should keep going. So you could go like this with many variables where you have effects that you want to make sure you capture. So this is really leveraging the capability to use GAMs, like the capability you have through GAMs. I said at the beginning, well, GAMs have been used in the insurance world for a few years now, well, 20 years, I guess. And it's, well, usually they are created manually, meaning that usually the actuaries would manually define which variable they want to use and manually define which groups they want to do, which nonlinearity they want to capture, how, and so. Here, what we created is something to use machine learning to generate GAMs automatically, meaning that during the competition, I could use automated generation of GAMs, and I could run grid search over how many variables I want to have, how robust I want my GAMs to be, my effects to be. I could use k-fold cross-validation and mix them with the GAM model, so mean that at the output of my grid search, I could review my model variable by variable. I could directly make sure I make no mistake, and I could well, interact with the models. So which allows to be, of course, much faster. So I did not spend, I don't remember how many weeks on this. So well, it's easier to do, and it's easier to make sure that you don't do any mistake during the creation. I don't know if I have 3 minutes. So I guess
you have 5.
5 minutes. So if it's okay, maybe I can show you how the models looks like here. So the model creation process looks like this. Well, you define your target and your exposure variables. You create a project. You exclude ex-post variable, or you exclude variables that you don't want to have in your model. For instance, for frequency model, you don't want to have the claims amount, and you create, like, you run your grid search. And here I created a grid search between 10 and 35 variables in order to explore how much I was gaining when I was increasing my model's complexity. Maybe I could have gained more by going further. I don't know, could have deteriorated the understanding, but maybe it could have been interesting to go further to see. And what you see here, I will zoom in a bit. What you see here is it's a grid search, so many models. And when the number of variables increases, the level of performance increases also, up to some point where you overfit and you decrease. And for this game, I took the most performant model out of sample, so a very, say, data science approach. And I could review my model. So it seems unlike, I don't remember, someone said that the most predictive variable was the vehicle age, still very predictive, but it's not first. And I could review the variables and make sure that the effects were making sense for what I want to do. Here, well, some of them, of course, are very hard to follow. Some of them are easier to follow. So I did quite heavy feature engineering. I think most of the things that were discussed, for instance, the age at the driving license, the age when you enter the age when you enter the portfolio, or the year when you enter the portfolio, all these kind of informations that I tried to fit in the models, and while using the magic of machine learning, I could check if it was making sense or not. And finally, when I looked at my final model, I could, so for instance, in this case, I could edit my model to make sure that I'm not missing anything here. So I could make sure that these risks, that without edition, I was overestimating these people. So I was missing an opportunity to convert these kind of people. And here I decided, well, looks like they are a low risk, and it makes sense to have people who got their driving license over 60 to be low risk. So I decided to put them in. So overall, to summarize, here the approach was very, very actual, I guess, meaning that it was really based on interactions with the model and understanding of the model, and it was clearly, well, convinced that this kind of like expertise included in the model really makes sense. It makes much more sense in real life than here in the game, but even here, I really believe that it's something that can be valued to ensure that the model is not adverse selecting you, or that you're not missing some opportunities to get good business. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Oh, just on time.
Yeah, that was the timer, exactly. Okay, thanks a lot, Guillaume. That was that I'm always impressed by accurate, and also, as Michael noted, by the sheer number of tabs you have open. It's pretty entertaining. Okay, so we do have a whole bunch of questions on Slido and on Zoom, but I'm gonna invite the panelists now to a little conversation between us, and after that we will start going into the leaderboard, and then we'll open up the floor for the Q&A. So if it's okay, Nigel, I'm gonna start with you. So insurance, in my mind, is historically one of the most data-rich industries that's out there. But judging from what we saw in the forums and what people were saying, their experiences from the industry, it seems like we're having a tough time moving past GLMs. Is this the case, in your opinion?
Oh, well, thanks, Ali, for the question. So, I mean, I'm an actuary working out of the UK, and I've been so for 30 years. And during that time, I've been a pricing actuary for 10 of those years. And the most recent 5 years moved into being a data scientist, chief data scientist from my company. And that gives me a bit of insight into the GLM versus the machine learning sort of competitors. And I think one of the reasons why GLMs are still so widely used is because they're damn good. They've had 30 years. I mean, I fitted my first GLM 30 years ago. 30 years of development. They can be adapted to work really well. And we've just seen with Guillaume and Grape Sentry, they do allow the ability to overlay intuition in a way that machine learning struggles with. So I think we still have GLMs playing an important part because they're highly developed, well understood, interpretable, and we've got a lot of people that know how to use them. That said, in recent times, if you go back 5 years ago when I started a data science function, people didn't believe that gradient boosting machines and the like could beat GLMs. But now, with places like Kaggle and of course competitions like this on AI Crowd, we're seeing that machine learning techniques, of which there's a wide variety, as we've just seen in the presentations, can give predictive accuracy. And I think everybody now recognizes they have something to add. And in the UK, we're seeing many insurers having data science teams and having elements of data science within their pricing. And it goes from a wide range from those that are just supplementing decision-making that goes into a GLM, right through to those that are experimenting with machine learning-led rate deployment. What I've seen he's shared here in those presentations has amazed me in that we can see what goes beyond what we're currently doing. We can see the use of stacking, we can see the use of neural networks, we can see the use of multiple types of machine learning techniques. And so I think there's a lot more still to go here, a lot more opportunity for development and use within the insurance pricing arena.
Okay, yeah, well, That's exactly my feeling as well from the outside. And I'm wondering, so this has been happening across multiple industries for some time now. You said like 5 years ago you've moved to the data science function, right? And I'm wondering if you see whether there is a blocker for the industry to start mass adoption, or is it happening and we're just, I'm not just looking at the right places.
I mean, I think it is happening. I think we're seeing, the participation of people here. Lots of them come from insurance backgrounds, so it is happening. Some of the barriers are around regulatory. Not everyone has freedom to set rates as they wish. In the UK, we do have that freedom, but that's not necessarily the case in US and Canada, and that does prevent adoption in the pricing arena of machine learning. But there we're seeing great adoption with elements of the claims handling, triaging, fraud detection, customer journey. So I think regulatory regimes have got to need to catch up. There is an element of training. It's great to see actual institutes around the world investing in these sorts of projects to help with training, and that's certainly coming online. And then we're starting to see, even in the previous presentation, tooling coming online that makes it easier to do this. So I think as there's more investment in those three things, machine learning will be adopted even more for the benefits of accuracy that we get, and increasingly these methods are explainable, and so that problem disappears. So I think that there's going to be a lot more to come.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. So I wanted to switch to Andrew. Andrew, could you please first give us a very brief intro in your previous experience? Because I think I have a question that's quite related to your previous experience.
Sure. I mean, at the moment, I'm working in a reinsurance company, so I'm working in reinsurance pricing. But I've worked as kind of an actuary for the past 20 years over kind of a number of different types of products in different areas of actuarial work. But I spent about 6 years working on motor pricing. But that was all a long time ago. It was all kind of GLMs. So I'm just trying to get up to speed now with kind of what's going on with machine learning in the field.
Yeah, fair enough. So, specifically the motor experience, because my understanding, Andrew, is that motor in real life and in this game is a highly commoditized product. So I'm wondering, what were some of the tricks in carving out a niche in such a market that you would normally be aware of? And did they work in this game? Could you make them work in this game?
Yeah, I think there is a difference kind of between what happens in the real world versus what you can do within this game in terms of finding a niche. Because I think like in the real world, if you're trying to build a niche for yourself, you can kind of have expertise in a particular area. So you could have, for example, something like an insurance company specializing in classic cars, that they can build an expertise in that area. They have a lot of data that they're building in that area. Maybe they have deals with manufacturers of particular vehicles. So if there are crashes involved, they can be more efficient kind of settling those types of claims. And also kind of they can have a brand that they're building that with people, so that like people know, okay, this is the insurance company you go to if you want your classic car insured. So like I think in the real world, it's very easy, or compared to this game, like this game's kind of like everything is cutthroat, that it's like the cheapest wins and brand means nothing. So I think in the real world, it's probably easier to build this kind of niche, whereas kind of in this game, your niche is kind of, I mean, we saw a lot of the presentations, people were finding mainly areas that they didn't want to write. So they didn't want to have large claims, so they kind of priced that high. Or I think within the forums, there were other people who were kind of also kind of looking at other high risk groups that they just didn't want to insure. But all of us get the same data in this game. And so we're all kind of limited in what we can do with that data. So there were quite some interesting kind of feature engineering that people were doing, that trying to extract as much information out of the data that they're getting. That's probably the only way you can really distinguish yourself, either to find these kind of high risk areas that you just try to avoid, or to find some clever feature engineering that means that you can find some part of the market that other people may have not have seen in that level of detail.
Okay. Yeah, that is what we saw. Flogman and I were the very first modelers with this data set trying to figure out what we can do, and we are totally blown away by the level of detail that people have been putting in their feature engineering. But I was going to ask, on the pricing in the real world, like stepping away from the game for a moment, you mentioned that there are lots of other types of data sources. A few obvious ones are, you might have some information in some way about what your competitors are pricing. Now, in some parts of the world, you can have price comparison on the website. In some other parts, you can have rate filing and stuff like that. I'm wondering, have you seen, full-blown modeling being deployed on that side? So not just heuristics, not just trying to build a brand, but full-blown modeling on that. Is that something that you've seen before?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite widespread throughout the industry that people are looking at conversion models and renewal models. So they're looking at the prices that their competitors are charging, or also kind of just looking at the business as it's coming in and seeing what policies are they winning, what policies are they not winning, so that they can tweak their rates. So like if they're getting a lot of young drivers and that's maybe too risky for the company, they will then start increasing their price in that segment. But I mean, there are a lot of kind of sophisticated analysis that companies are doing, kind of looking at kind of conversion models and renewal retention models, where they are looking to see if they change the price a little bit, how does that impact the likelihood that somebody's going to renew their policy. This sort of thing, like it's quite common at the moment, but there's also kind of an element of regulatory scrutiny in this area, because potentially it can lead to some people who are maybe they're not price sensitive because it's a vulnerable group. So, for example, I don't know, elderly drivers might be one example where they don't shop around very often because they're maybe not that familiar with kind of how to use the internet to buy their insurance on it. And if insurers are trying to exploit this kind of behavior, there's kind of an ethical element to it that from a regulatory point of view, it's a bit uncomfortable from an ethical point of view.
Yeah. I mean, I've in some of the literature review leading up to this, we were looking at some of the FCA reports that specifically addresses this personalized pricing point. Now, if it's okay, thanks a lot, Andrew. I'm gonna switch to Janet talking about data sources, because we just spoke, Andrew, that there are some other data sources about trying to create these personalized prices, but you can't do that because of some ethical concerns as regulatory concerns. Janet, I'm wondering, can you tell us a bit about how new data, not specifically about pricing, but maybe stuff like telematics, data that could give insurers an edge in a commoditized market. Do you have any idea of what those data sources could look like?
Sure, I think there's a wide variety of potential data sources. I think maybe just backing up a bit, the models are definitely heavily regulated in markets like the US, where you have to file them for the states in most states, and there's a lot of scrutiny on those. But that being said, even if you're using a GLM model, you have a range from 1 to indicated, and within that range, you can fit many other models to select which factor to use. And so I would say probably many years ago, there were already tree models that were helping people select in between. And for the personal lines, I think the focus especially is on more customer lifetime value. So even beyond immediate retention, the likelihood of purchase, there's more of a focus on the longer term, because as Andrew pointed out, some certain segments of the customers are going to be very profitable long term. And Progressive, I think, in their annual statements even list out their customer segments like the Robinsons, the Dianes, and there's a lot more data than just pure insurance that can be used.
Okay, and I'm wondering, talking for like taking a step back away from data that can model customer elasticity. What about modeling data, like claims modeling data? The data that we saw in this challenge was quite classic. Here are like 30 columns about people. What other new data sources that are coming in that maybe we don't have the full toolkit to exploit yet?
Yeah, so I think for motor insurance, like if one way to think about it is segmenting it into the variables related to the driver, variables related to the vehicle, and then variables related to the environment. So in this data set for the competition, we have quite a few of the like traditional driver variables. It's maybe missing on things like their violations in detail. So we have the policy discount, claim discount as the only kind of variable that correlates to that, but there's a lot more data on that aspect as far as like, did they get tickets, speeding tickets, even if they didn't cause an accident, that could have an impact on their driving. On the vehicle, we have the hashed vehicle make model, which is missing a lot of information that a standard carrier would have access to. So I think Michael brought up using vehicle popularity, and potentially that could relate to the repair cost of the vehicle. It could also say something about the personality of the driver, and if they're likely to buy, if a driver buys a car that's very popular, that might say something about their driving behavior as well. So I think there's some potential things you can do with that. One variable we looked at also was the speed. So if I think of coming up with a vehicle speed, typically I would just think I throw out a round number, something kilometers, but some of the digits ended with a 9, some ended with something. Was that something that you can use as a like manufacturer distinction, or there's I think some things that we can try to pull out of the data we got for the vehicle side. On the environment side, we just had 2. So we had the town service area, the population, which then you can create a density variable. But with data now, like in real life, if you have telematics, you know exactly where this car is. You can bring in the weather information, the traffic information, and of course, the telematics information.
On telematics, I always have this gnawing feeling that, first of all, modeling that kind of longitudinal data is hard. It's much bigger. It's different. It's different. I can't just like fit linear regression to that as easily. But on the other hand, would you say that as an industry, we have been collecting telematics data long enough for it to be useful?
Yes, I don't think you need that much telematics data because it is very large in quantity. The technology was patented in the 90s, so we've had plenty of time to collect it, especially Progressive. And I think at this point, even if you're a newcomer, you don't need that much data because once you have telematics data, you have an indicator for crashes. You might not have the severity piece, but like if your telematics data is showing that you went from like 20 kilometers per hour, like your speed change immediately to 0, you probably got into an accident. So that data alone can you can just score it to get like a likelihood of collision, and then with that score, then put it into your GLM. So that's or a gradient boosted model.
Okay, yeah, or gradient boosted, yeah, exactly.
Yes, and I think another maybe interesting thing to note about this competition is everyone has the same data. So in real life, the bigger you are, the more data you have, and probably you have a leg up because of the more data you have. But in this case, you don't get that benefit from being big.
It's really hard to design a game where you can have that kind of play earlier, get more data dynamic, because you will be messing with people's incentives in so many different ways. If you try to incentivize maximizing market share at the cost of money, then people how do you do that? But it is something that we did think about, and it's in the list of very long-term to-dos. Anyway, thanks a lot, Janet. I was gonna swap to Simon. Am I pronouncing it right? Is it Simon or Simon?
Simon in French.
Ah, Simon. Well, there we go. So, Simon, you were, one of the most active people on the forums, and first, thanks a lot for that, as well as all the other community engagement prize winners and panelists. But one thing that you did do that not many others did was you shared your model, that you were using for a long time with everyone. Now, the reason I mention this is that in a competition like this, as Andrew was mentioning, cutthroat, cheapest wins, how unique your model's predictions are is one of your biggest edges. So why did you share your model?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I could say that it was a trap. I found a mistake in my code the last week, but that wasn't the point. Well, actually, my expectation of winning was like my expectation for earnings was about $0. So like I had nothing to lose, and it was more of I'm a big like learning in public fan. Like I find that sharing stuff is the best way to get feedback on it, and so basically that was my way to say like, here's what I did, and maybe like start a conversation. Because basically I was seeing this competition more as maybe as a water cooler, like as a place to chat, or maybe like a conference, as opposed to, because like in insurance we're very secretive. We don't share that much between companies, as opposed to academia or government sector. So I thought it was a good place to just like throw in ideas and see what happens.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because so inside the computer science community, specifically inside the security community, the people who make the encryption algorithms and so on, there is this culture where you make things open source, and then as a result things become more secure because other people find bugs in your code. Now, there is a version of the world in my mind, it might be a bit utopic, but if you can go and share your code on modeling online and other people can come and improve it, you could have a more actuarially fair world on the other side that you offer prices. Do you think there is any room for that kind of dynamic in the real world? I mean, there are all sorts of problems, but what do you think?
That's a good question. Maybe the other person more experienced in the insurance and industry could answer for that. But yeah, I don't see that happening, really.
Yeah, that's true. So it's an interesting point to make. Well, on that one, I'm just going to go back briefly to Nigel to see what his take is on that question. Nigel, what do you think? Is there room for doing that?
Yeah, I think to some extent that kind of happens because lots of us are using open source algorithms. The dilemma is that someone's paying our wages, and that means we've got to make a profit, and that kind of means you can't share everything. But there are other insurance models that have some sort of sharing back to society. So maybe there's room for sharing in that sort of regime. But I think as it stands, there are barriers to sharing too much detail in order to make sure there's a competitive market.
That's interesting. Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. I know that you've all been waiting quite patiently until we reveal the leaderboard. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. Where are we? There it is. So can you all see the screen? If one person confirms, that would be enough.
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. So the winners of the challenge are, on fourth place, we have Michael. Michael Ordozo, congratulations, Michael. On third, we have Edwin. Congratulations to Edwin. For the second place, we have Glep, who is Guillaume, who is, I don't know if he's around. I know he's a colleague of Simon, but congratulations to you. And lastly, in first place, we have David and team. So congratulations to David and everyone else. The leaderboard is currently live, so you can go and check it out on the website if you want to see your own position. Lastly, this is an honorary mention of the top 10. We have Guillaume there, we have Jocelyn there, Grape Sentry is number 10, and a few others that you can see. So on that note, I'm going to leave this here. We're going to take 5 minutes, so until 6:40 GMT, and then we'll come back for a Q&A, which will last until around 7 p.m. So I'm going to mute myself now, and hopefully there won't be too much of a backlash. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen as the leaderboard is live. Okay. I think we can come back. Rishank, if it's possible to stop the music, that would be awesome. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, I just want to thank the panelists and the presenters one more time. It's been a bit abrupt going between these things because of the time constraints. But we can now dive into a few questions that exist online. So maybe I will start first. If any of the panelists, starting with Nigel, have any questions from the presenters, let's start from there, and then we'll go into the questions from the audience. So Nigel, if you have any questions, now would be the time.
No questions from me. Just to say thank you so much to all of those that presented back, and it's great to see just how much work everybody did. And you know, I can't see where I ended up on the leaderboard, but you know, I can see why others must have been above me. So you know, great effort and brilliant to see.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks a lot. How about Andrew? If there are any questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say also congratulations to all of them as well. I am kind of curious that there were very kind of detailed models to come up with an expected claim cost, but then on top of that, people are putting on profit loadings. And I suppose the interesting bit was, like, if you spend a lot of time getting a model that's so accurate and so precise, but then you put a loading on top of that, does that kind of offset some of the accuracy that you're getting from your model? Maybe it ask some of the top two, maybe.
I don't know, David?
Yeah, actually, I would say I spend 90% of my time training the model accuracy. Only until the week 8 or week 9 that I start looking at the profit, actually, the pricing strategy. Yeah, I do agree that I need to sacrifice the accuracy for profit. So first is I sacrifice half of the market share, basically, to avoid the large claim. Second is we actually doesn't have a symmetric feedback from our price. So it is always okay to overprice. It's just not okay to underprice. So so we need to sacrifice accuracy in the sense that we always overprice but not underprice. Yeah, I think that's the key. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Then next I was going to ask Janet, how about you? Like, are there any questions that you had from the presenters?
Yeah, I'm curious. I think pretty much everyone used stacked models or ensembled their models, and that I think would get you the best loss accuracy, but I'm curious if that's the right approach for the pricing part of the competition, since your ensemble will always be in the middle. So maybe it's not as, I guess, it's harder to identify the niche market since it's always going to be in the middle. But I'm curious what the presenters think.
I know Suguru and Grape Sentry is a stacked model. What do you guys think?
Anyway, by the way, congratulations, top 4 participants. So yeah, so we believe so. Our model was the simplest model out of 5 groups, but it was too conservative, and our model didn't have enough RMC. That's the key, I think.
Okay, cool. And I guess last, Simon, do you have any questions from the presenters by any chance?
Sorry, I didn't build any questions for now. I just
Okay,
wanted to say that
perfect.
Gleb is probably moving back to Europe anytime soon, so might want to pick him up.
Fantastic. Okay, so then there are a few questions from inside throughout the presentations that have been popped up. So I'll go ahead and address those, and then we can have an open discussion. So the first one was a question directed to Michael. What tool have you used to manage and analyze the data from different models?
Well, I've been strictly using R, so trying to code from scratch. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So it's all standard R. Yeah.
Yeah, because just I wasn't allowed to use any of the company's tools, so that's why I started on my own.
Yeah, yeah. That's perfect. So there is actually related to that. Somebody's asked, how did Accurate submit their solution in terms of Python R code? And the answer to that is that we came to within the research team. If you have used the Accurate models, you'll know that the training code isn't submitted in a very standard way. So I had a conversation with Guillaume because we need the training code, and we came to an agreement on how we can retrain the models when needed. That's a good question. Okay, we'll get to that soon in a moment. But basically, the next question is directed to Grape Sentry, which is, can you say something about the impact of stacking compared to results without stacking?
So as we mentioned earlier, random forest can capture large losses better than GLM. So with stacking and without stacking, differentiate a lot, we thought.
Okay. So
Yeah,
GLM, it's a large
GLM can just capture the attritional something sort of mean or median like losses.
I see. Okay. And while I have you here, the other question is that how do you calculate attritional loss models? Is there a particular way?
Yeah, it might be repeated. First is set the threshold with chronological validation, and we took out only the data with below a certain value threshold, build it with stepwise GLM. Yeah.
I see. Okay, perfect. So I think that was all the questions that I had here. Please, if anybody has questions, you can either raise your hand on the chat, or the panelists can ask questions from each other without me being in the middle. So please go on. And I think Vishank, you also had, you wanted to make a few comments. So please.
Nothing, just I wanted to tell everyone congratulations, and it was amazing fun to host this challenge on AI Crowd. We hope to maybe do it something like this again in future and see that we have this competition repeating and get the community engaging even better and do even more amazing things. So one thing we can do is we can do a quick round around the room and just get everyone's quick reactions on what are their reactions on the leaderboard, and in general if they have any comments, something like that. So maybe Ali, we can start with you. And
Yes, sorry, can I just, for one moment, take a step back, because Jörg has just mentioned on the chat that there were some Slido questions that we were not monitoring. So
yeah.
So on Slido, Tom has asked, interesting that no one called out the multimodal claim distribution, somewhat invalidating gamma and 2D assumptions. Did anyone attempt to get around the multimodal claim distribution? If you're in the audience as well, please please do raise your hand and we'll get you talking.
Also, we are at relatively low number of participants now, so I'm going to be brave and allow everyone to unmute themselves. Hopefully, if if it turns into too much chaos, I'll switch it back on. But for now.
Okay. I guess, Tom, the answer is that nobody got around it. They just took it as is. The other thing that Tom is mentioning is that did we run any sensitivity analysis on the final leaderboard? We did.
Loss ratio, so my revenue was only 5% greater than my losses.
Sorry, that was sorry. I was gonna.
I couldn't have reduced my prices to write more.
Rashad, if you could mute everyone for once, and then.
Better.
Yeah.
I was a bit unlucky not to get seconds, but.
Okay, so basically, to answer the question from Tom, did we run the sensitivity analysis on the final leaderboard? Yes, we did. That's one of the reasons why it took so long. So the way that we construct the final leaderboard is we run the theoretical metric that we have on generating it, which there's an explanation of that on the discourse. We also additionally run a simulated version of the markets, and we look at the results from that independently and make sure that those two results are in line with each other. And there is, from the results that we have, the rankings are identical from both of those. So that's the first piece that we do. The second one that we do is code inspection. We look through people's code every single submission, and Florian and I spent quite a few days on this. And we try to make sure that none of the models are doing anything that looks strange. That's one of the reasons that we were trying to disqualify the no-code models, but all of the people who had submitted no-code models got back to us, submitted their training code, and we went over it, and it was fine. Now, and that's it. I think that's all the questions that we have. Okay, so now I'll get it, leave it up to everybody else to butt in. Oh, we have Monty. Hello, Monty. So for anyone who doesn't know, Monty is the CEO of AI Crowd. And he cannot mute himself. Okay.
No, I'm unmuted. Let's not put it that way. I'm like the rogue researcher who encourages shit like this. Okay, exactly. But anyway, I'll let Vrushank and Ali lead this. But it has been a phenomenal experience, basically watching this whole challenge take shape, and also all the activity around it. But basically, it's really retraced the foundational principles around which we started AI Crowd. So I'm glad Ali managed to still lead it through, and I'm looking forward to see what Ali pushes it to.
Fantastic. Great. Okay. So going back to some of the earlier questions, I'm wondering from anybody who's present, maybe also with you, Michael, what would you say was realistic about the dynamics you were experiencing here, and what wasn't realistic at all?
Well, I guess realistically, we were missing some variables, like not using the claim history. That was, which is a big driver in the insurance. That was unrealistic. But I love the way we had to challenge ourselves to price differently. So that was novel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. I'm also hoping to get Florimon's point of view on how we ended up thinking about preventing people from having bad behavior with regards to how much data we give them, because we had lots of conversations about this. So do you think we managed to do that?
I mean, you know this really well, Annie, as well, but like there was a lot of discussion on what can we give that basically that would, you know, at the same time enable this kind of market dynamics and that we've seen throughout the game, but at the same time not like incentivize bad behavior. And an example, like we've talked a lot about price comparison websites, something that we've discussed extensively at great length in the research team as well. And we saw one of the problems with the price comparison website is that in real life, you know, when you price, you give a price to a contract. Well, if someone actually buys it, you have to follow through. You have to give them the price. However, in this game, you have absolutely no incentive to give a price that you would be willing to pay. So we'd probably end up with like a, you know, in the price comparison website, everything is pricing at, I don't know, super high prices. You're like, well, that's great. I'm just going to price, I don't know, twice what I would normally do. And you're having competition, you just completely like out-competed on every front. That's kind of one of the things that we've been, that, you know, we've considered for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a very interesting and challenging process of like this process of back and forth of trying to come up with something that, you know, is better for the participants for sure, to like improve your models, because otherwise it's you know, shooting in the dark. And at the same time, like thinking of what can people do? How can they mess up the game? Like how can they hack us effectively? So yeah, that was a really interesting process.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Okay, and
I
yeah.
have a question. When you hashed the vehicle make model, did you think about us trying to reverse engineer it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's kind of interesting because like the expertise of our research team, and I mean, of what Ali and I have been doing is privacy research, and actually that's a question that's really important in privacy. Like, how do you hash things such that, you know, you can't trivially reverse it? So that's definitely something we've been considering for sure. Have you tried reversing it?
Not using decryption, but using the speed and weight. I thought it would be, since it's manufacturer information, you could look it up with the external database using those as keys and retrieve much more information around the vehicle.
Yeah.
It was costly. It was about $200, so I didn't.
Maybe you lost $5,000 on this, though. Maybe you should.
Yeah.
Yeah. Opportunity cost. Yeah.
I certainly tried to do that, but was not successful. I thought the fact that you were telling us there are a certain number of hybrids and how long they'd been around, you'd probably be able to pinpoint it to a certain vehicle, but it was insufficient information for me to unwind all of that.
By design.
Yes, no doubt. I'm more successful than other competitions that have done similar things.
You know, on that front, if provocative questions are fair game, my question would be, how fair are simulated games of poker when you're not losing money? But I think one of the key philosophical points of question that you are asking in simulated games like these is that even if there is not an immediate negative reward in place, you still are creating a system in which each actor, each agent is still trying to kind of behave optimally. And that still gives you access to a simulated market, which is a lot more valuable than you would imagine in a setup like that. Again, just a thought.
Talking about actors behaving optimally, Frank, who is on the call at the moment, is the person who had told me one of the possible strategies that could be used was to use this kind of P-beauty contest strategy. And we've been discussing that on the forums. How much should I set my margin is dependent on how much I think other people think I will set my margin. And so on. You can play this game forever. But Janet, you were mentioning that you guys don't think that's the right way to think about it.
So I think my team wasted most weeks because a lot of the early weeks because we were just charging way less than what the profit needed to be. And because of the competitive market, we were thinking the profit margin would be low single digits, not nearly anywhere close to the 30% or so that Michael had put on his analysis. But one of our earlier tries was, so Kevin Dalton on my team, from his game theory notes, made a note that depending on the number of competitors you have, your profit margin should be charged based on that. In an auction market, you want to bid the lowest possible for what you want. In ours, it's switched. So if you use the first bidder auction market, but then turn it around, the Nash equilibrium would be the number of competitors divided by that -1 would be your profit margin, which works out to be 11%, which is still nowhere close to what was needed for this. So yeah, I don't have a good explanation for it.
Yeah, what do you think, Frank? I don't know.
Yeah, hi, Ali. You hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, well, the P-Beauty contest is something that I've played many times with my students, but also with colleagues. And because the profit margin started at 100%, right? You had this example where you multiply the expected claims by 2. So I thought it was a good candidate. And I did expect, yes, I didn't expect that ultimately that we are in that range of 12 to 14%, which is typically what what you get in a P-Beauty context when you have a sophisticated audience. And well, we ended up there, not surprisingly to me. On the other hand, it may just be pure luck, so I would have to think about it a bit more. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see that number.
Yeah. I mean, I am constantly scratching my head over how we ended up in a market where people actually were adding margins and the profits weren't being eroded away. But happy to see.
Right, we can take in some more questions, or we have an open mic now, I guess.
Hi, 5th place here. So regarding Tom's questions earlier about multimodal, I know for GLMs, they are quite robust, right, to get their assumptions broken. So I know in my job, when I did GLM models, I remember testing like real our data for this, and in the end, the impact on the model was very, very small. So yeah, just to add some of my let's say knowledge on this. So that's why it's not something I looked into during this competition.
That's interesting. There you go, Tom. And I'm sure, Jocelyn, you're very happy to be number 5.
Oh my God, huh?
Yes, exactly. But by the way, I should mention that for people who have one, we'll be contacting you separately.
He won the bonus rounds as well.
Yeah, that's what I just looked.
Oh, sorry, I'm here.
Yeah. It's Michael. We can't hear you. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Oh.
So the bonus round I won. So at least I have my. I know that my model is good, but the main difference between the main and the bonus round is that reading the comments, right? we shared a bit our approach, so I adapted mine. So I tried that town ID thing, population concatenated with area. Was bad. Maybe I was not able to work it well enough for it to have no leakage. And, you know, I didn't want to spend a whole week on the bonus round. So in the end, the only thing that stuck is that I built 2 sets of 4 models. So one is with claim history and the other one is without claim history. I pass a list of policy number that I know their claim history, and the predict function, it predicts using either the 4 sets of model with claim history or the 4 sets of model without. Whereas in the main leaderboard, what I did is I just had 4 sets of models. So the new policies, right, the 43,000 or so new policies were predicted as if they were year 0, because that's where not as if they were year 0, but in year 0, we didn't have any data. So I think that was maybe the big difference between the main leaderboard. And so at least I have a good understanding of what was missing from my model to be actually able to maybe have a better position in the final model. But yeah, I'm very happy because that share of techniques and ideas was able to be already leveraged and test with that additional round. So the bonus round is very welcomed.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks to Simon, who started that thread actually and started posting his entire trick 4 hours before the competition ended, which was very exciting. Just to give you guys a warning, we're going to be closing this one down in around 5 minutes. But I am also curious about Frank and what approach you took, because I know you were working quite a lot on this and we were having lots of back and forth on trying to make the model work.
Sorry, Ali, say it again.
I was saying, I was wondering what approach you ended up using between round 1 and round 2.
Oh, well, I stuck with XGBoost, frankly. I like someone else in the call, I started from scratch with R, and I was largely focused on just building a model. But I used XGBoost. However, I made some changes. I did policies iteration, so I did a weighting of the observations based on the age of the policy information, and that actually did help. I didn't make a lot of improvements, but yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
It was great to see everybody play. Somebody's asked if there will be a certificate. We are going to be looking into that option. I can't make any promises. And the other one is that we're in the process of trying to give the winners of the bonus round something. So stay tuned. I'm not promising anything, but stay tuned on that. Michael, I'm wondering if you can unmute yourself. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, Jocelyn, I was wondering, were you also in your bonus round, in your model, also keep the age information of the clients? I did. And also a general, more broader question, how were you guys dealing with the year variable? On my own, I was removing it, but trying to train everything up to year 4. So everything was trained on year 4, and for my pricing, I would use some inflation measures to move it around every year. So I was wondering how people were dealing with the years.
So since there was a question for me first, I didn't keep the age. I'm not sure how I would have went doing that. Oh yeah, I could have used the old training. No, I used the notebook. So the notebook, I think the new version of the data didn't have any age in it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so that's yeah. And my model earlier, I was saying my 4 models, it's a 3D loss cost, frequency, severity, and I did the XGBoost with a linear booster because I know there are linear interactions in there. So I said, you know what? The 3s sometimes are missing something. So I did straight average of those 3, frequency, severity plus linear plus loss cost. So looks like it worked out in the end.
And Simon, did you end up uploading the training data to be able to handle the year variable?
Also for the year variable, there's something I planned to do, but I don't know what I did. But I ended up uploading the number of claims, and like it didn't work out that well. But I uploaded like a ratio for the number of claims and model and the town IDs. Like if we use that credibility definition that was shared on the forums, basically, my correction was if I'm undercharging, then I'm giving 100% credibility to your town ID, and if I'm overcharging, then I give no credibility and I don't give you a rebate. I was quick to charge you more, but not to charge you less. But for years, I think I just dropped it and forgot to adjust it.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I got a question as well. So I think a vehicle model is one of the key features for the other presenters. Well, actually for me, I dropped the vehicle model ID variable because I try categorical embedding from neural networks. I also try target encoding, one-hot encoding, or like only keep the top 10 vehicle model and do the encoding. They all make a worse model for me. So for me, my guess is the vehicle details like speed, weight, or age actually provide enough information, and the ID doesn't contain much. That's why I dropped this feature. I'm interested to know how the other treat this variable.
I think, yeah, unless there are other comments, we can continue those conversations on Discourse if necessary. We do have to end this one, but I'd like to say before I do that, from our perspective, the experience of running the challenge has been very rewarding, especially because of all the community that has popped up around it. I remember seeing Nigel's first post on tips on submissions, and I was super excited. Aside from other communications from Nigel's would make me super scared very early on, as you would know. The community has been really incredible. So I'd like to first thank all the participants and the panelists and presenters, not only for playing the game and being here, but also being here for such a long time. It's a 2-hour session in front of the camera. It's not easy. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And you will be hearing from me very likely about, murmurs of future plans. So keep that in your mind. And thank you for joining in. It's been a great discussion.
And one thing we should all do is let's take a Zoom selfie. If everybody can switch on their video for a short while. Awesome. So just seeing some videos turning on.
We still have 40% when don't have the videos on. It's easy to measure. And we want all the selfies, and we want a big smiley face and a thumbs up, stuff like that.
David, hi.
Okay, we managed to squeeze out as much as we could. Rushan, up to you.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ali, your video really ran away, and we have a little bit of a leadership vacuum here, and a bunch of us are a bit confused.
Yeah,
so
no,
how about you
no,
unmute yourself and let us know
no,
what to do?
it's
Thank you
over.
so much.
Please feel free. Yeah, feel free to leave. I'm just trying to figure out how to end the seminar.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and
While
congratulations
all of us
again.
leave, I hugely appreciate all the engagement we got in this competition, but we promise you we'll bring back more. Thank you so much. It'll be Ali who'll bring back more.
Bye-bye.